संसार दावा नललीढलोका त्राणाय कारुण्य घना घनत्वं संसार प्राप्तस्य कल्याणगुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् अप्रभु कीर्तन नित्य गीता वादित्रमात्यान् मनसो रसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पाश्रुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् विग्रहाराधननित्यनाम्ना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमार्जनार्दो भक्तांश्च निनुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् युक्तैश्च भक्तांश्च निनुञ्जतो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् चतुर्विध श्री भगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला प्रतीक्षण स्वादनलोलुपास वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् निकुञ्जयोनारति केली सीताय यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रादिदाक्षान्ततिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोर्यः प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो ध्यायस्तु वंशस्य यशास्त्रीसन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं ध्यायस्तु वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमः। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे नमस्ते। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadvaya Namah Hariharaya Namah Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadvaya Namah Hariharaya Namah Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Gopal Govinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radhe Jaya Radha. Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman, Sita Ram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman, Jaya Sita. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya. Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev. नित्ताय गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्ताय गौरा हरि बोल नित्ताय गौरा हरि बोल गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल
हरे कृष्णा। नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाय दायिने हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वसः शीलतङ्कनकालाय इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यत यत यामि ततो नरसिंहो भये नरसिंहो हृदये नरसिंहो नरसिंहम् अधिशरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नकामभूतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपुतनभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव करकमलवरे नकामभूतशृङ्गा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपुतनभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे, जय जगदीश हरे, जगदीश हरे। जय नरसिंहदेव, 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 जय नरसिंहदेव। जय भक्त प्रहलाद, प्रहलाद, भक्त प्रहलाद, जय भक्त प्रहलाद। जय प्रभुपाद, 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय गुरुदेव।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्णा प्रेयसी नमो नमः जे तो मारा शरण लोए तारा वांछा पूर्ण होए कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी मोराए अभिलाष बिलास कुंज दियो वास नयने है जुगल रूप राशि এই নিবেদন ধারো সাকিরানো গাতা করো সেবায় अधिकार দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী दीना कृष्ण दासे कोय ये ना मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो तुलसी महारानी जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी जयो वृंदा देवी निताय गौरा हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदा देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय।
Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Ki jai. Darpanam Marchanam Bhavamaha Davagni Nirvapanam Shailaka Iraga Chandrika Vitaranam Vidya Vadhujivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Patipradam Pranam Ritasvadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vichayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Namakari Baruda Nicha Sarvasaktis Tajapita Niyamitak Smaranina Kala Etadrisita Vakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Dudaivandusi Samihajanina Anuraga Trinada Pisani Chena Tarora Pisa Hisnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Nadalam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Va Jagadishakamaye Mamane Dandani Jamanishware Bhavatad Bhakti Rahaitu Kitwai Ainandatu Najakikaram Patitam Mam Shame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Padapankajas Titatu Disad Visam Vichintaya Nayanam Gavadasurudharaya Vadanam Gadgadurudaya Jira Kulakadisitam Babu Kada Tavanamagrahane Bhavishyati Yugayitam Nimesena Chatsusa Bhavrasaitam Svanyayitam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Vidahiname Aslishyava Padaratam Pinastumam Adarsanam Ramahato Karotovam Yata Tata Vavidatu Lampato Matpananatas Saeb Naparaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to the living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names, like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen to this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing font constantly when I chant your holy name? When my voice shook, and when will the hairs on my body stand on end at the recitation of your holy name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in the absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord. Unconditionally, Shri Chaitanya Siksastakam Ki Jai. Shri Guru Pranama prayers Ki Jai. Om Aganyati Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksus Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jitaha Pachakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinbandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Sorry, go ahead. Namaste Gauravani Shimurtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidantat Mantaharine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutli Shrimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shivarsuvanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Saksharvaragya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhuma Sri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanshakalpa Turabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurachuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mamamanda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bhojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpadramadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastato Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevimano Smarami Shiman Rasara Sarambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Stute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Shri Brahma Samhita, Shri Guru Pranam prayers ki jai, Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam, Chintamani Prakara Satma Sukalpa Riksha Laksha Prite Susuravir Avipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrama Sevyaman Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kwanantam Arvinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandar Prakuti Kamani Yavishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvanamarga Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranay Keli Kala Vilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalentri Vrittimanti Pasyanti Pantika Yanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Madhyam Purana Purusham Navavanam Cha Vedesa Durlabam Madurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manasomani Pungamana Sopyasti Yatva Parisimya Vichintya Tattve Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatum Jagananda Kotim Yaschakti Rasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yadva Rastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Mevani Gama Patitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Patibhavitabis Tabirya Evan Jarupa Tayakalabi Goloka Evan Visata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesu Vilokayanti Yam Sham Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatistan Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvnesu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumanga Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadasya Yatani Vyadi Taratascha Teswa Vigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyanti Atsurayaha Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Misha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primary cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. And by him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him because he is the absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma Projita Kaitravotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastava Matra Vastu Shivadam Tapo Trayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite Kim Vapare Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakriti Bihisa Susavristakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva, in its maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3 Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam muhur aho raska bhuvibhavaka. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literature. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami, therefore this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although this nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. So today we're hearing from Canto 3, Chapter 12, verse number 8. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Satarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Canto 3, Chapter 12, verse number 8. Savai Ruroda Devanam Purvajo Bhagavan Bhava Namani Kurume Data Stanani Cha Jagat Guru Sa He Vai Certainly Ruroda cried loudly Devanam Purvaja the eldest of all demigods Bhagavan the most powerful Bhava Lord Shiva Namani different names Kuru designate Me my Data O destiny maker Stanani places Cha also Jagat Guru O teacher of the universe. Translation. After his birth he began to cry, O destiny maker, teacher of the universe, kindly designate my name and place. So this is the appearance of Lord Shiva. Once the four Kumaras refused to follow their father's instruction to get married and produce praja or progeny, they said, no, we don't want to get older, get married, etc. We want to stay young, and we want to always be engaged in devotional service, etc. Their father, Brahma, after giving this direct order, he became very upset that they refused to follow his order. He tried to mask his anger, but eventually it came out in the form of a red spot on his forehead, and out of that red spot came Lord Shiva, or appeared in the material world as Lord Shiva. And he was reddish and bluish, and of course Brahma was not able to curb his anger, and then Lord Shiva appears as Rudra in a mixed color of blue and red, or ignorance and passion, because anger is the product of passion and ignorance. Okay, so there's no purport, so we'll go on to the next verse. Iti tasya vacha padmo Bhagavan paripalayan abhyad dahad Bhadraya Vacha Marodistat Karomite Iti. Thus, Tasya, his, Vacha, request, Padma, one who is born from the lotus flower, Bhagavan, the powerful, Paripalayan, accepting the request, Abhyadat, pacified, Bhadraya, by gentle, Vacha, words, Ma, do not, Rodi, cry, Tat, that, Karomi, I shall do it, Te, as desired by you. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The all-powerful Brahma, who was born from the lotus flower, pacified the boy with gentle words, accepting his request, and said, do not cry, I shall certainly do as you desire. What was his desire? Well, Lord Shiva's or Rudra's asking, finally designate my name and place. In other words, tell me what my purpose in life is. So, again, we go to text 10. We'll just read the English translation. Thereafter Brahma said, O chief of the demigods, you shall be called by the name Rudra by all people because you have so anxiously cried. Text number 11. Hrid Indriyani Asuryo Ma Vayur Agni Jalam Mahi Suryas Chandras Tapas Chaiva Stananya Gre Kritanite Hrit, the heart. Indriyani, the senses. Asu, life air. Vyoma, the sky. Vayu, the air. Agni, fire. Jalam, water. Mahi, the earth. Surya, the sun. Chandra, the moon. Tapa, austerity. Cha, as well as. Eva, certainly. Stanani, all these places. Agre, herein before. Kritani, already made. Te, for you. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. My dear boy, I have already selected the following places for your residence: the heart, the senses, the air of life, the sky, the air, the fire, the water, the earth, the sun, the moon, and austerity. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So who would like to read?
Purport by Prabhupada. The creation of Rudra from between the eyebrows of Brahma as the result of his anger, generated from the mode of passion, partly touched by ignorance, is very significant. In Bhagavad Gita 3.37, the principle of Rudra is described. Krodha, anger, is the product of Kama, lust, which is the result of the mode of passion. When lust and anchoring are unsatisfied, the element of Krodha appears, which is the formidable enemy of the conditioned soul. The most sinful and inimical passion is inimical passion is represented as ahankara, or the false egocentric attitude of thinking oneself to be all in all. Such an egocentric attitude on the part of the conditional soul, who is completely under the control of material nature, is described in Bhagavad Gita as foolish. The egocentric attitude is a manifestation of the Rudra principle in the art, wherein Krodha, anger, is generated. This anger develops in the art and is further manifested through various senses like the eyes, hands, and legs. When a man is angry, he expresses such anger with red hot eyes and sometimes makes a display of clenching his fist or kicking his legs. The exhibition of the Rudra principle. This exhibition of the Rudra principle is the proof of Rudra's presence in such places. When a man is angry, he breathes very rapidly, and thus Rudra is represented in the air of life or in the activities of breathing. When the sky is overcast with dense clouds and roars in anger, and when the wind blows very fiercely, the Rudra principle is manifested. And so, also when the sea water is infuriated by the wind, infuriated by the wind, it appears in a gloomy future of Rudra, which is very fearful to the common man. When fire is ablaze, we can also experience the presence of Rudra, and when there is an inundation over the earth, we can understand that this is also the representation of Rudra. There are many earthly creatures who constantly represent the Rudra element. The snake, tiger, and lion are always representation of Rudra. Sometimes because of the extreme heat of the sun, there are cases of hot stroke and due to the cases of heat stroke, and due to extreme coolness created by the moon, there are cases of collapse. There are many sages empowered with the influence of austerity and many yogis. Philosophers and renouncers who sometimes exhibit their acquired power under the influence of Rudra, principle of anger and fashion. The great yogi Durvasa, under the influence of this Rudra principle, picked a quarrel with Maharaj Ambarish, and a Brahmin boy exhibited the Rudra principle by cursing the great king Parikshit. When the Rudra principle is exhibited by a person who are not engaged by persons who are not engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the anger person falls down the peak of his improved position.
The angry person falls down from the peak of his improved position.
This is confirmed as follows.
Okay. Yene Ravindaksha Vimukta Mahaninas Twai Asta Bhaved Avisuddha Buddhaya Arura Krichena Parampadam Tata Patanti Adyo Nadvita Yusmad Angraya Srimad Bhagavatam 10.2.32. The most lamentable fall down of the impersonalist is due to his false and unreasonable claim of being one with the Supreme. Now, there's an alternate translation of this verse, and it says, someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees, but who have accepted the different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? In answer to this question, Lord Brahma and other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So there's a wonderful alternate translation of this verse. So this is explaining the appearance of Lord Shiva in the material world, and he comes, what you could say, in different Rudra manifestations. And there's a description of that. What's very important here is understanding the genesis of anger, which is very destructive and creates all kinds of problems. Of course, we've discussed what is bona fide or what is anger, like in the form of Jatayu. When he saw Sita being kidnapped, he became very angry and fought with Ravana. So that's justified anger. But what's being explained here is anger due to lust and the mode of passion. And it's very destructive. And we see that all the time. There's road rage. There are people, there's war. There's people that are suing each other. There's all these political people attacking each other. And so anger is very destructive. And here it says, it refers to a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Let's go to that. That is Bhagavad Gita, verse number, third chapter, 37th verse. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Esa Krodha Esa Rajaguna Samudbhava Mahasana Mahapapma Vidi Enam Ihavairinam. So, the translation says, the Supreme Personality of God said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath or anger, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So, the Sanskrit word Vairinam means the greatest enemy. And we see that this is true. People get into all kinds of states of anger. And this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 62 and 63. But we're discussing now the genesis of this destructive anger. Dahayato vishayam pumsa sangat te subhajayate. Sangat sanjayate kama, kama krodha bhajayate. Krodhad bhavati samoha. Samohat smriti vidbrahma. Smriti brahmsad buddhina so manasyati. This says, while contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. So this is the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 62 and 63. A person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. And then it says, from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool or cesspool. So here we see there's a lot of very significant information about the genesis and very destructive nature of anger. And unless we learn as devotees how to control this, we also go down that slippery slope of which begins by not seeing things correctly. So it says, Dahayato Vishayam Pumsa, while contemplating the objects of the senses. So what are the objects of the senses? Anything that we focus our attention to. And if we, let's say you see a car, or you see a handsome person, or a beautiful woman, or you see some clothing, or you see a nice house, or you see so many different things. Now the question is, how should we see? So in Sanskrit, the word for philosophy is darshan. Darshan means how you see. Now the word for philosophy in English is philosophy. It's Greek, taken from the Greek words philos. So in other words, the love of wisdom. So there's a major difference between the definition love of wisdom and how you see things. Why don't you look up the dictionary translation of a dictionary translation of philosophy. What does it say?
The study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. A particular system of philosophical thought, the study of the theoretical basis of particular breach of knowledge or experience, the philosophy of science.
Yeah, okay. So let somebody else speak next time. So, but Sanskrit is not as, let's say, complicated. It says simply how you see. For example, a mother sees her child with the eyes and mindset of love and protection. And a child molester looks at the same child, but with the concept of exploitation of that child for selfish sense gratification. So we see there is, this how to see properly is really a much better way of approaching the concept of philosophy. Because if we learn to see things correctly, now how do we learn to see things correctly? We come to class and we listen to the Vedic literature, as we're doing right now. So how should we see things correctly? We should see the presence of Krishna in the heart of every living entity as Paramatma, and right next to Paramatma we should see the existence of the Jivatma, or the individual soul, you and me. If we only see the body, we do not see correctly, and we will not have any real approach to philosophy or to the truth. And almost everyone, up to 99% of the population of the universe, of the world, do not see correctly. They see the body as being the person. But that's not true. It's the soul that is the actual person. And not only that, God is also present in our heart as the Paramatma. So right off the beginning, everyone is not seeing properly, and therefore they fall into this trap of Dhayato Vishayam Pumsa Sangat Desu Bhajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kama Kruda Bhajayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. So lust means almost uncontrollable desire, right? It's very, very powerful desire. Just like we explained the 3 steps before action, 3 psychological steps: thinking, feeling, and willing. So when we come to the willing part, that's where lust has seized our mind, and we say, unless I do this, I will never be happy. Right? So this is not only psychology, but it is going even deeper than that into why people become entrapped in the cycle of birth and death. So it's not simply a psychology explanation, but it's an explanation of the dire state of almost the entire population of the world, of being completely illusioned and acting in delusional ways due to not being able to see things correctly. So therefore it says, while contemplating the objects of senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. And then, from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So, now if we come to the verse, chapter 3, verse number 37, Kama esa kroda esa raja guna samudbhava mahasana mahapatma vidi enam ihavarinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath or anger, and which is the all-devouring, sinful enemy of this world. So now, what we're going to do now, we're going to see the complete correspondence of Srila Prabhupada. So he's written so many things, so many books, but he never contradicts himself. So we're going now from the Bhagavad Gita to Srimad Bhagavatam. But first we'll read this purport. And who's going to read now? Third chapter, 37th verse, Bhagavad Gita. Purport.
Yes, Maharaj. When a living entity comes in contact with the material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust.
Now, right there is a huge statement. Right? When the living entity, meaning you and me, comes in contact with material creation, his or her eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust. So we see that love can be transformed into lust. Well, we see that every day in the material world, right? So many people develop this lust, and because of lust, they do all kinds of crazy things. Like one example, look up incel, I-N-C-E-L. We'll continue in this purport, but I just want to give you a quick example of how crazy people become because of lust. What's it say? Incel?
A member of an online community of young men who consider themselves unable to attract women sexually, typically associated with views that are hostile toward women and men who are sexually active.
Okay, so this is an organization. They're on the internet. They're mostly men. And they're angry. They're angry because they think that because women have, feministic, let's say, values now, they are not submitting to men, or at least certain class of men, like like the incel people, and that they're angry, and they justify abuse of women. They justify even killing women. And there are many examples of that. Right? Now, this is not only in the United States, it goes around the world. So you see how crazy people become because of lust. Lust means you have excessive desire to do something, but for some reason or other you're not able to do it, so you become very angry. So the incel people, there are examples of them. They lose control of themselves and go out and they purposely murder women and other people sometimes. Okay, so that's an example of how love can be transformed into lust. And then because of lust, if there's any frustration, there's extreme anger. And because of that anger, there is destruction. So go ahead.
His eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust. As milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. Then again, when lust is unsatisfied, it turns into wrath.
Anger. Yeah.
Wrath is transformed into illusion, and illusion continues the material existence. Therefore, lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. And it is lust only which induces the pure living entity to remain entangled in the material world.
So when you see movie stars dressed with basically see-through clothing, right? What's the purpose of that? Or when they have mini skirts on and they have very low neck clothing where you can see the parts of their breasts and things like that. What's the purpose of all that? It's to inspire lust and desirability, right? It's a type of you would call it a incentive. Here, come. I'm offering this to you. So the whole culture nowadays is based on this type of incentive of lust. And it's not surprising that there's so much violence in society today. Okay, go ahead. Let's hear some more.
Wrath is a manifestation of the mode of ignorance. These modes exhibit themselves as wrath and other corollaries. If therefore the mode of passion, instead of being degraded into the mode of ignorance, is elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting, then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath. Degradation of wrath by spiritual attachment.
So that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. It's the method of living and acting, prescribed method of living and acting. Then one can, it's being elevated to the mode of goodness by the prescribed method of living and acting. Then one can be saved from the degradation of wrath or anger by spiritual attachment. Well, attachment to what? Attachment to Krishna, not attachment to the body. Attachment to seeing that the real person is the soul, is not the body. Go ahead.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead expanded himself into many for his ever-increasing spiritual bliss. And the living entities are parts and parcels of the spiritual bliss. They also have partial independence. But by misuse of their independence, When the service attitude is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. This
So
material.
that is the key right there. When the attitude, when the service attitude, service to who? Service to God, attitude is transformed transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust. This is what's happening in schools today. Even on the level of first, second, third grade, all the way up to PhD. People are being harangued by the publicity for increasing lust. And because of that, most people are failing in their attempts for spiritual emancipation. Not most, almost all. So it says, but by misuse of this independence, when the service attitude for God is transformed into the propensity for sense enjoyment, they come under the sway of lust, or under the influence of lust. This material creation is created by the Lord to give facility to the conditioned souls to fulfill these lustful propensities, and when completely baffled by prolonged lustful activities, the living entities begin to inquire about their real position. So there's two ways the Lord is trying to convince people to go back to Godhead, not to stay in the material world. One is by speaking the Bhagavad Gita, and we're reading it now. You can see how much detailed information there is, explaining why people become entangled in the cycle of birth and death, and have almost impossible possibility of getting free of it. On the other hand, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and the Vaishnava Acharyas, it's become very easy in this most, let's say, unfortunate age of Kali Yuga. It's become very easy to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death, whereas before it was much more difficult. But because of the overwhelming propaganda for sense gratification, for increasing lust, most people become completely bewildered and pursue a life of lust, anger, greed, illusion, and madness, etc. They just lose control of themselves. And then examples of that are, like, we're seeing it right now, the war in Ukraine and Russia, and politicians fighting each other, and family problems, and so forth. We see it all around us, where people have lost the ability to control their mind and senses, and they just submit to lusty and greedy and passionate behavior that is very destructive. Go ahead.
This inquiry is the beginning of the Vedanta Sutras, wherein it is said, Atato Brahma Jignasha. One should inquire into the Supreme, and the Supreme is defined in Srimad Bhagavatam as Janmadiyasya Eto Anvayad
Nivayad.
Itaratascha, or the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman.
Okay, let's talk about that word, Supreme Brahman. The impersonalist philosophers have a false definition of what is the Supreme Brahman. The correct understanding of the Supreme Brahman, it says, Vedanti tat tattvavidas tattvam adgyanam, Vayam. Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti Sabhyate. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, I think it's verse 6 or something like that, where it says that the Supreme Absolute Truth is understood in three levels: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So the ultimate realization of Brahman is understanding the effulgence that comes from the body of Krishna, called the Brahman or Brahmajyoti. Then the Paramatma expansion of Lord, which is where he expands himself infinitely in the heart of every living entity and even into every atom of the universe. And then Bhagavan, in his eternal transcendental form of Krishna, playing the flute and eternally engaged in transcendental activities of love and devotion in Goloka or in Vaikuntha as Narayana. So here we see the real understanding of this phrase, the origin of everything is the Supreme Brahman. It does not refer only to the Brahmajyoti effulgence that comes from the body of Krishna, but it refers to the Brahman effulgence, the Paramatma presence of Krishna in every atom and in the heart of every living entity, and ultimately Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Janmadasya Yata, that from which everything emanates. That's the real definition of Brahman. The Mayavadis, of course, they are experts at cancel culture. So they cancel out Krishna, they cancel out the spiritual world, they cancel out all the jivas, they cancel out the material world, and they just meditate on the effulgence of the Brahmajyoti, and they cancel out the existence of all the living jivas, and they say there's only one soul, that's Brahman. So we see that by canceling things out like that, no one gets an opportunity to get free from the cycle of birth and death. And even the Mayavadis, who engage in tremendous austerities and penances and so forth, in spite of all that, they do not get liberation from the cycle of birth and death, because they've canceled out the essential parts of knowledge and reality, and create this false reality that there's only one thing, and that's this effulgence of the Brahmajyoti. And that's not true. There's much more than the Brahmajyoti. Okay, go ahead.
Therefore, the origin of lust is also in the Supreme. If, therefore, lust is transformed into love for the Supreme, or transformed into Krishna consciousness, or in other words, desiring everything for Krishna, then both lust and wrath can be spiritualized. Hanuman,
Yes, like Hanuman. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hanuman, the great servitor of Lord Rama, exhibited his wrath by burning the golden city of Ravana. But by doing so, he became the greatest devotee of the Lord. Here also in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord induces Arjuna to engage his wrath upon his enemies for the satisfaction of the Lord. Therefore, lust and wrath, when they are employed in Krishna consciousness, become our friends instead of our enemies.
Now, this is real philosophy. This is real understanding. So it is possible to transform everything from ignorance to knowledge, from lust to love, etc. And this is explained in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in verse number 34, which says, I'm sorry, verse number 24, which says, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmar no Brahmanahutam Brahmaivatena Gantavya Brahmakarma Samadhina. This is a very important verse, 4th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, verse 24. We won't read the whole purport, but basically it says that the word Brahma or Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti, but when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, and the process of consumption, the contributor and the result, are all combined together, Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth, regains its spiritual quality. Now, this is the main point. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. So what is Krishna consciousness? It's the process of transforming everything that seems to be material into its real form, which is spiritual. That is what Krishna consciousness is all about. So, now, what does that mean? That means that anything that comes from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janmadasya Yata, the source of everything, is actually spiritual, including the material world. Therefore, you have what's called Pada Prakriti, or the superior spiritual energy of the Lord, and the Apada Prakriti, or the inferior energy of the Lord, or the material nature. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhirevacha hankara itima me bina paktirastata. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. That is called the Apara Prakriti, the inferior spiritual energy. So actually, the material world and what we see of this material world is actually the energy of the Lord. Therefore, it is spiritual. But when it's exploited for sense gratification, it becomes veiled by illusion due to lust, anger, greed, madness, and illusion, and enviousness. So we need to carefully read Bhagavad Gita, understand what is our real position in this world, and liberate ourselves from this illusory consciousness of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending as the purpose of life. That is not the purpose of life. When we eat only prasadam and we control our sleep to wake up in the Brahma Muhurta period, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and come to the temple and hear Bhagavad Gita and eat only prasadam, or holy or sanctified foodstuffs offered to the Lord first, then we have a spiritual life. But if people simply eat, sleep, mate, and defend like animals, they have a material life and they stay trapped by lust, anger, greed, etc. Okay, so this is all profound information, and the same thing is being explained in this verse today with the purport, which says, it says, the creation of Rudra from between the eyebrows of Brahma as the result of his anger, generated from the mode of passion, partly touched by ignorance, is very significant. In Bhagavad Gita 3:37, the principle of Rudra is described. Krodha, anger, is the product of kama, lust, which is the result of the mode of passion. When lust and hankering are unsatisfied, the elements of Krodha appears, which is the formidable enemy of the conditioned soul. This most sinful and inimical passion is represented as ahankara, or the false egocentric attitude of thinking oneself to be all in all. That such an egocentric attitude on the part of the conditioned soul, who is completely under the control of the material nature, is described in Bhagavad Gita as foolish. The egocentric attitude is a manifestation of the Rudra principle in the heart, wherein Krodha, anger, is generated. This anger develops in the heart and is further manifested through various senses like the eyes, hands, legs, etc. So here we see the complete correspondence of what Prabhupada is saying in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, with what he has said previously in the 3rd chapter, verse 37 of Bhagavad Gita, and in other places. This total correspondence. He never contradicts himself, and he always stays on topic. So, and this topic is the most important because this explains why people fail in their attempts to become free from the cycle of birth and death. And on the other hand, how by, like I said, Krishna instructs people in two ways. One, by speaking Bhagavad Gita and making it easy in the age of Kali to go back to Godhead. Kali Yuga is the age that we're living in now. It's the worst age, but the process for going back to Godhead is easiest in this age. And the other way is that Krishna will help people try and satisfy their lusty desires until they become completely frustrated, trying over and over again to become happy through lust and being subject to anger and greed, etc. And finally, being exhausted, they may ask questions, they may try and understand why they're suffering, and they may, if they're fortunate, meet genuine devotees of the Lord and get the answers to how they can be liberated from this cycle of birth and death. So we see there's two ways that Krishna is instructing people. So why should we go through the arduous and horrible experience of becoming, let's say, victims of lust, anger, and greed, and trying over and over again to squeeze out sense gratification from this body and from other bodies? We should reject that completely and develop a love and devotion for the Lord, and then we'll be liberated from the cycle of birth and death, and that solves all the problems of humanity. Okay, I'll stop right there. Are there any questions you would like to ask? This is a big subject. We'll be discussing it more and more. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Yeah, excellent lecture today.
What?
A very good lecture, Maharaj, today. At least we got a lot of connections, how anger is happening, and connecting to Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
Maharaj, one question here. here Brahma is giving Shiva in all the places, like where Krishna is there in the art, senses, everywhere, right? Water. I see now, today only I realized Rudra is there in all the places, like art and all. I was not knowing that. Why Brahma is selected such kind of a place where Rudra should be there in art, the sense, the air of life, everywhere. Now I'm little confused where now Krishna is also there, Rudra is also there. How to know in the art?
How to know what?
How to know whether when we are acting upon whether we are acting Krishna conscious or Shiva, Rudra.
Well, you can know very easily. You're getting angry.
Whenever we get angry, we are in.
Well, like I said, there's justifiable anger and there's non-justifiable anger.
Okay.
When you get that non-justifiable anger, you start breathing heavily. Your eyes start popping out a little bit. You get like, you have these very, very negative thoughts.
Okay.
You want to get revenge.
Okay. Okay.
You know, that means that you're under the complete influence of Rudra.
Rudra. Okay. Okay.
Whereas you say, well, this person insulted me, but it's not me that was insulted. This is my false ego. So
Okay.
I'm not really hurt by this, right? You're beginning to see things clearly then. And you understand the difference between who you are. You're an eternal soul, the eternal servant of Krishna. You're not this body, and you're not a sense gratifier. You've given it up. And you're using all your senses to please Krishna now. So you're free of this lust, anger, greed, etc. Okay. These are the three doors to hell: lust, anger, and greed.
Lust, anger, and greed. Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah.
Haribol. Anyone else?
So the place of residence for Rudra is also the moon. So the moon, should we say, whenever there is a freezing cold, that's when the Rudra is manifested, Maharaj, because it's mentioned the moon.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And the other one is interesting, austerity. How
What?
the austerity?
Austerity?
Yeah. How do we see Rudra in the austerity?
Well, like for example, sometimes people do austerities to get power to destroy someone. So when you're performing, severe tapasya, just like Hiranyakashipu engaged in severe tapasya. He was standing on his toes with his arms up like this for 125 years in one place. And he stood there so long that a whole ant population developed, and they ate all his flesh and blood. And still he was alive, right? And then finally, Lord Brahma came and said, look, why are you doing this terrible tapasya? What's your purpose? And he said, I want to be Amara. So Brahma said, well, I'm not Amara, so I can't give you something I don't have. So then Hiranyakashipu said, well, then I should not be killed by any Devata or any Asura. And he gave all these conditions, and Brahma said yes to all of those. But how was Hiranyakashipu killed? By this unimaginable creature called Narasinghadev, half lion, half human. And he never mentioned a creature like that, you see. So there's an example of someone doing severe tapasya, but for a very negative purpose. And there are many people like that. Look at all the severe tapasya they went through to make the atomic bomb, so they could throw it on. They wanted to throw it on the Nazis, but they defeated the Nazis earlier than they completed the bomb. So they used the bomb on Japan, right? So, I mean, they went through tremendous tapasya to do that. And look at what they're doing today with all these weapons of mass destruction. There's a new airplane that came out by America. It's like gigantic, machine, and extremely dangerous. Right? So they're just creating more and more weapons of mass destruction that are frightening, right? Okay, so these are great, let's say, examples of tapasya, but for the wrong reason, not to please the Lord. It's because of their lust, anger, and greed. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Today's and yesterday's class reconfirms that what we learned earlier, that Shiva is the son of Brahma.
Yeah.
In the previous. So
he appears like that, although he's superior to Brahma.
Right. Yeah. So we also learned that there are different forms of Rudras.
11.
So is the Rudra we are seeing is one of them, or is it the primary Shiva?
That's a good question. I'm not ready to answer it right now.
The second
I'll
question.
come back with that answer. Go ahead.
Sure, Maharaj. The second one is we also learned that when Krishna looks at Mother Earth, when he impregnates, the energy is what Shiva is what my understanding is.
What happens is that Krishna impregnates the jivas through the Shiva Linga. And Shiva Linga is actually a combination of Maya's yoni and Shiva Linga. And then it goes to Maya, and then it appears in the material world. So Shiva is the material conduit of the souls. But the real origin is Krishna. Right? That's my understanding. So, therefore, it may seem that Shiva is like God, right? Because he's so powerful. But this question was answered many years ago when the Devatas sent Bhrigu Muni to understand who was actually God. Is it Brahma? Is it Shiva? Or is it Krishna? Or in other words, Vishnu. And I've told the story before. I mean, you know what the story
in Krishna
is.
book.
Yeah. So he came back and he said, look, there's no doubt about it that Krishna or Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because Bhrigu Muni had a relationship with Brahma. He's the son of Brahma. He's the brother of Shiva. And he is the number one, worshiper of Krishna. So he had a relationship with all three. So with Brahma, he did not give him proper respect. And Brahma, again, became angry, but he was able to control it, right? And then when he went to see Shiva, he actually insulted Shiva. And Shiva was going to kill him, but Parvati stopped him. Otherwise, he would have killed his brother. Right? And when he went to Lord, so the first one was a mental, let's say, offense. The second one was a what you would call very offensive, misbehavior. But the third one, when he went to see Lord Vishnu, he actually jumped up on the chest of the Lord, where Lakshmi puts her head, and physically insulted him, which was the worst. But Lord Vishnu did not get disturbed by it. So, therefore, Brigamuni understood that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he has complete control of his mind, intelligence, everything. Anger, right? And Brahma also became angry, but was able to control it. But he was angry. But Lord Vishnu was overwhelmingly submissive and transcendental, and was not influenced at all by that offense.
Growing up, Maharaj, we heard a story that, there was a situation where Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu were, who is the earliest, who is the greatest, and one goes up the route and Vishnu goes down the route. There is a story about it, and that's where Shiva manifests and says that I am the Supreme. So is that a made-up story, or what? How do we understand that?
Now, Shiva, have you ever heard of Shiva being the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual world?
No.
No. He is supreme in the material
World. Okay.
right? But he has this default that he's slightly influenced by tamas. He's in charge of the tamasic mood, but he's slightly influenced by it, and then it shows in different pastimes. But that does not negate the fact of his tremendous amount of power in the material world.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Haribol. Okay, so we'll stop there and continue tomorrow. Thank you very much. You see how lust leads to very, very destructive things. Just like the incel. So a group of extremely self-destructive and societal destructive men who've gone crazy because of their sexual frustration. Did you know something like that existed? Yeah, let's see. And it's all because of lust. That's the all-devouring enemy of the human being.
Shri Guru Cherana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Nandamui Savadana Mate Jahara Prasade Bai E Baba Turiya Jai
Prasade Bai E Baba Toriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hote Gurumukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Kya
Padma Vakya Ashitete Gloria Aikya
Arana Kuriya Mani Asha
Anakoriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charani Rati Aise Uttama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते विदे गाय जहरा चरितो श्री गुरु अरुणा सिंधु आदमा जय नारा बंधु लोके ना लोके राजीवाना आह प्रभु कोरो दोया देहा मोरे पादा चाया एबे जास घुसुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतिता पावाना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गणधर श्रीवासदि
Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Jai Gaura Hari Bol.
Lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my conscience purified by the words emanating from his lotus feet. Attachment to his lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with knowledge. He is my Lord, from he makes shining by ignorance, that he ignorance is destroyed. The very scriptures in the his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, shelters of the streets. Srila Prabhupada.